Welcome, this is Rachel M. Colby with Tattooed on Your Heart. Today I am honored and thrilled to welcome and introduce you to civil rights icon and leader, Ambassador Andrew Young. Ambassador Young is a trusted friend and top strategist to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Ambassador Young was also a friend and Hartford Seminary roommate of my father-in-law, the Reverend Roy Colby. My father-in-law, the Reverend Roy Colby, was co-pastor with Dr. James Spicer of Chapel on Hill in Oak Ridge, Tennessee in the 60s. And they worked together to help integrate Oak Ridge, which was under the grip of Jim Crow at the time still. And I'm currently, for your information, Dr. Young, I don't know if you saw the email I sent, but I'm currently working on a book about the stories of Oak Ridge is one of them, based on Dr. Spicer's accounts that he gave me when I asked him to tell me one story, and he gave me several, but I need Black voices. I need voices of people that were adults and children at the time. And so I'm seeking those, and I figured that you would be a very rich addition for anything you had to add about this time and about, well, civil rights, anything like that. You also were at the March Against Fear. And you remember that one? Yes, in Mississippi, as were my in-laws. And that is, I sent the link to that blog post on my website. That's called One Blood. And it chronicles the events when my in-laws participated. They brought all the children, and talks about you coming out and greeting them and going out and getting Dr. King and bringing him out. And Dr. King came and laid hands on the children and prayed for them, and greeted, my husband and my sister-in-law. Fondly remember that. But
well, anyway, what I remember, what I remember is the impact that your grandfather and mother had on me.
Oh, okay. Well, my mother-in-law and father-in-law, yes. Okay.
I mean, I was not yet, well, I wasn't sure. I mean, I had no sense of calling, no sense of being religious. I volunteered for the United Christian Youth Movement, called to United Christian Action. And it was a nationwide effort that I happened to drive with my minister to the organizing conference in Texas. And it turned out that we were the only two Black people there. And they wanted this program to be integrated, since it was a church program. And they asked me to volunteer. Well, I wasn't even sure yet what I was volunteering for, but I did. And I did because there was nobody else Black. And I said, well, I believe in integration. And if this is going to be integrated, I have to integrate it. But I didn't know what was expected of me. And I had majored in biology and chemistry in college, and I had just finished. And they assigned me to work in Connecticut. Well, when I got to Connecticut, they had not found, nobody had thought about a place for me to live. And so they called Hartford Theological Seminary and asked if they had an extra room, and they did. And that's how I got out there. But I'd never even heard of it before. And I met, well, I met your grandfather.
It's my father-in-law, my husband's.
Your father-in-law.
Yes.
And mother, and they were just such delightful people. They were like the perfect couple. And they welcomed me. And one of Roy's friends, I remember, was a real smarty. fella, and he came up to me and he said, "What's a nice looking fellow like you doing in a place like this? Are you running from some girl, or are you trying to stay out of the army?" And I said, "Well, really, I don't think either, but maybe both." And but it was a place that was filled with humor and laughter, where everybody was different. They probably had 40 different nationalities on that campus because it was a missionary school. It was a Christian education. You got a master's in Christian education, which is what Gene got, and Roy got the Bachelor of Divinity. But they were just, I mean, everybody I met there, it was the first time I'd been with so many white people. And it wasn't just white people. We had about a dozen, well, at least 10 Japanese students. We had students from South Africa. We had students from the Middle East. In fact, we had a big Middle Eastern institute that meant that there were always a lot of students there who were studying in the Arabic department. But the diversity of the campus made me feel quite comfortable. Everybody was different, so none of us was too different.
So this was
And
Hartford,
we
where
all seemed to get along.
yeah. So
I
this
don't remember a single. I was there 3 years. I don't remember a single argument.
wow.
You know, and it was just what I needed after college, because I finished college at 19, and I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. My father was a dentist, and I knew I didn't want to be a dentist, but that's what he wanted me to be. And it took me till I got there to be able to break with him and tell him I was not going to be a.
Right.
And he said, "Well, I saw you through college. Now you're on your own." And he said, I don't want to invest. He was a good Christian, went to church, a deacon in the church, tithe. But he said, all the preachers I know are either poor or crooked, and I don't want you to be either. So if you're going to go to seminary, you're on your own. And I was on my own. But I walked in the dean's office and he gave me a scholarship. And everybody received me so well that I was sure that this was right for me.
Wow.
But that was 3 years I was there. Um,
So how did they, so you're saying that my in-laws helped influence you in the direction of civil rights?
well, they didn't have to. I was coming out of the South,
Mm-hmm.
and this was the first time I'd been in a totally interracial environment. And they just accepted me. Nobody made any fuss over it. I was just like everybody else.
Right.
And I don't think we even talked about race that much.
Wow.
We talked about theology. We talked um, a lot about South Africa, because there were South African missionaries there, and a South African working on his PhD in anthropology, Black South African. We talked a lot about South Africa because we had a lot of Japanese students. One of the Japanese students had been a lieutenant in the Japanese Navy. And Hartford Theological Seminary was had a lot of Quaker influence, and so there was a strong influence on nonviolent social change.
Right.
But mostly what I remember was I think we all worked in the kitchen, in the cafeteria, in the sense that you could eat for free if you didn't mind helping to set the table. And so there were some people who kind of set the table and cleared it at the end of it. And my roommate and I decided that we'd be the dishwashers. So we would go and eat and then jump up before everybody else and then go back as the dishes started coming off the table. We would start washing them. That the camaraderie around getting the dishes done, because we had to eat and do the dishes in 2 hours.
Well, that's pretty amazing. Such a common task, if you will.
But it was a common task that made us all friends.
That's awesome. That's doing life together, right? Well, did you talk to my father-in-law at all about, at some point, do you remember any conversations you had about your involvement, his involvement in integration?
Well, see, I had no involvement.
Right.
In at that time.
Right.
That was I had been in an all-black college.
Right.
I did go to Boston University for one summer. So I'd been in integrated schools, but I'd never been in a predominantly white environment.
Right.
But I was so comfortable in it, and I was received so well that there was nothing to discuss.
So how did you get from there to being Dr. Martin Luther King's close?
Well, it took a long time because I left there and went to a little country. Well, I went to a little church in Alabama where my wife was born, Jean. But it so happened that Dr. King's wife was born in the same little town, 3,000 people, and she and Jean went to the same high school. And I met him when I went to speak at Talladega College. And they had invited him first, but I don't know, I think they thought he might not show up. He might be too busy, and so they invited me as a backup, and we both showed up. So we both took part in a religious emphasis week discussion at Talladega College in 1957. And then I came back to New York to work for the National Council of Churches. And when the Nashville sit-in story came on television in 1960, 61, Jean said, "It's time for us to go home." I said, "We are home. We just bought this house in Queens." And she said, "No, my home will never be in the North." And I said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" She said, "Let's sell this house and go back south." And I said, "What am I going to do?" And she said, "I don't know. The Lord will work something out." And so she had gotten her master's at Queens College. And she also had our third baby. And we quit our job and sold our house and started back to Well, we started back to Atlanta, and the national denomination, the United Church of Christ, had done some work, had done a lot of work across the South in education, and there were schools that used to be run, and they were no longer in use. So I knew about one near Savannah, Georgia, and I asked them if they would help fix it up and let Martin Luther King's group use it to train people in voter registration. It was a citizenship education program. And they said, well, we can do that if you will go down and be the administrator of the project. So that's how I got a job. And I was on the United Church of Christ staff, but I was working in Martin Luther King's organization.
Oh.
And since Jean was not there, she was in Marion, Alabama with her babies, 3 of them then. Dr. King's secretary said that since your wife is not here, you need something to do at night to keep you out of trouble. But I don't know that I do, but I was staying at the YMCA, but she gave me a big box, an egg crate, about 2 feet wide and almost 18 inches deep. And it was packed with letters tied in tight little bundles. And every night I would take open one of those bundles of letters and try to write answers to them. And so that's how I got to be Martin Luther King's assistant. But I was a volunteer. I wasn't a paid assistant.
Oh, well, you found your calling.
Yep, I did. And gradually he began to ask me to do more and more.
So that is amazing. So the letters, I assume, were they to Dr. King or?
No, they were to him from all over the world.
Okay.
And I was writing them as though they were coming from him.
A ghostwriter.
Yeah, and he was impressed. He said, "How does he know what I'm thinking?" And evidently, and I said, "Well, you went to Boston University and I went to Hartford Theological Seminary. We were probably reading the same books and they were teaching pretty much the same thing. So I guess I kind of could imagine how you would think about these questions."
That's amazing. All right. Do you have any recollections of the March Against Fear? Anything you'd like to say about that?
Well, the March Against Fear was started by James Meredith in Mississippi, right outside of Memphis. And it was something he did on his own. And it was stupid. I mean, to just go walking down the Mississippi Highway by yourself to show that you're not afraid in 1966 was a sure way to get shot, which he did. Then we were working in voter registration, mostly in Georgia and Alabama. And we had just started a movement against slums in Chicago. And to have to add the March Against Fear to all that we were doing when we only had about 30 staff members, and no money. I mean, Dr. King never had more than $600,000 a year to do everything he had to do. And none of us had any money, and we had to raise it as we went along. And so it put an extra burden on the civil rights movement when we were sort of feeling like we had set the notion that nonviolent social change will work in the South, in Birmingham, in Selma, in St. Augustine, Albany, Georgia. We had had a lot of activity in the southern states, but people were saying that nonviolence wouldn't work in the North. So we had just gotten to Chicago to begin to work on some of the problems of Northern segregation.
But you participated anyway. You still participated?
Well, we did, because there's a sort of an unwritten pledge in the movement that if the only way you can protect nonviolence power is if somebody is killed in a nonviolent march or demonstration, then a group has to take it up where he left off and keep it going. Otherwise, you give your enemies and adversaries, you're sending the message that all you have to do is kill one of them and they'll quit. And we had to have it just the opposite, that if somebody got killed, at least 10, 20 people had to take his place.
Well, you did a lot more than that. It was several thousand.
Well,
at the end of the march.
At least 1,000.
So that's amazing. If you don't mind, after this, I will send you the link to that article. And I also have newspaper clippings from when you came to Oak Ridge too. So, and church magazine things, I think too. What I'm, as I said in the email, I'm concerned because it seems many have forgotten our history, the precepts of the Constitution, the lessons of the civil rights movement of the past, yours and Dr. Martin Luther King's teachings. I don't believe our work is done. So what would you say, what lessons do you think we need to remember from the past to help us now? And what steps can we take to continue the work of civil rights and advancing peace and justice for all, to bring unity to our nation without compromising righteousness and freedom?
Well, Dr. King used to say that there were at least 3 phases of this movement, and that we had to deal with overt racism, where you were just discriminated against because of the color of your skin. But that was just the beginning. Our country was normally, usually at war during my childhood, right on through till 1966, 68, the war in Vietnam raged. So we were constantly at war. And we didn't think that war was the best way to solve problems.
Okay.
So that, in fact, Dr. King used to say things like, the bombs we drop on Vietnam will explode at home in inflation and unemployment. And because the movement, we categorized it around 3 issues: racism, war, and poverty. And he would say about war, the bombs you drop on Vietnam will explode at home in inflation and unemployment. And so the third phase of the movement was how to deal with poverty. So it was racism, war, and poverty. And the main method of dealing with that has been to register to vote and be able to elect people of goodwill who will represent you in government. And we had all of that going. And that proved to be a real burden for the staff of our organization, because there were only about 35 or 40 of us. And we had to be now divided into 3 or 4 different areas.
Wow.
But the struggle was necessary.
So how can we, in the case of, bridging the gap, the racial tensions we're facing, what do you think is the cause, and what can we do to, what do you think are some things we can do to bring unity to our nation and bridge this?
Well, see, I think we're facing, I may be wrong, but I think we're facing fewer racial tensions now than at any time in my life.
Yes.
And the reason is that we are so much more integrated at work, in our sports, and all our entertainment is now, and education is interracial. And we find that we're really getting along quite well. But there are still differences, and those differences are still predominantly economic.
Okay. Can you tell?
And that's why they're harder to deal with. I mean, you can picket the city hall, and they can put up a voter registration office to register you, see? But they're getting so complicated now with things that they say are not race, but they are. I mean, things like suppression of voter registration, that hurts mostly poor people, particularly Black and brown poor people. But it hurts white poor people too. And now we're at a time where one party is afraid of being outvoted by the other party, strictly on the basis of more people. And I don't like to talk about it. And I believe in bipartisan politics. I mean, sometimes I voted Republican when I first came to Georgia. When I moved to New York, I voted Republican. But when I lived in Connecticut, I voted Democrat. When I moved here in Georgia, first I voted Democrat. I mean, I voted Democrat most of the time. And so I like 2 healthy competitive parties. But people seem to want to split them, and they want to split them on the basis of race and class. And And that's not healthy for democracy. The news the last couple of days, I mean, we clearly won the election here in Georgia, and yet the president called up and asked them, "Can you switch 1,100 votes so I will win Georgia?" Well, that's really a crime. But the two parties have there's sort of so much in disagreement that we're having difficulty finding the basic constitutional truths that we need to live on to make sure that our democracy prevails.
Okay. I don't know if you want to go there. Do you have any thoughts on the issues that have been brought to light
Well,
with some of the police between
well,
police and racial issues?
yeah, I think that I think we had all those issues when I was mayor, but we had very little police violence. In fact, our problem more was we had more violence against the police from racketeers and hoodlums and drug dealers, you know, and so that law enforcement is complex, and it's complicated by race and class. And I don't know what the issue was with George Floyd, but that just seemed to be an unnecessary death. And the man who convicted of it, I don't know that he could tell you why he was so angry with George Floyd that he kept his knee on his neck.
I don't think it's rational. I think it's the spirit of hate, really, which is an ignorant and vile spirit. It has to do with a hard heart.
Well, I don't like to use the term hate,
right?
Because I think it was more, I can't remember the policeman's name, but it was more his insecurities. And he and George Floyd knew each other, and they worked for the same after hours place for several years. And George Floyd worked inside and he worked outside. And it probably made him very mad to hear the partying and the laughing and the music going inside in the wintertime, and he's out in the cold watching, and his job was to watch the cars. And George Floyd's job was sort of an inside bouncer. But everybody seemed to love George Floyd, and nobody seemed to pay much attention to this other guy.
You're very kind and gracious.
Well, you have to be, I think. And well,
Can you tell us a little bit about your documentary for All the Saints? What is your intent, your vision, your goal for the documentary?
Well, when John Lewis and C.T. Vivian died, I realized that especially because of the COVID, we had a number of people dying who had been very active in the civil rights movement, but they were not famous. And yet they were in many ways just as important to the movement as those of us who got, put in the paper. And so we wanted to make sure that people understood that this was a movement of all of the people. And that's why I called it For All the Saints. Because many people acted in very decent and righteous ways in the middle of a lot of violence and frustration.
So what do you hope the impact of this documentary will be, and where is it in production in the process?
Well, there's several things. One, there are those individual court cases, but the biggest issue right now is in the hands of Joe Biden. And I like the idea of doing better by everything and everybody. And I'm drawing a blank on that slogan. Can you remember it?
No, I'm sorry.
But the federal government has been taking care of, I mean, rich people are very secure. And we have to let poor people be on the same level of security. They don't have to have the same amount of money. They don't have to have the same number of blessings, but they do have to have a substantive basic wage that allows them to be in the society, which is a great society.
Okay. I think what we need is what's promised is what needs to be there is the opportunity to, right? For people to better themselves, equal opportunity for that, to pursue that,
Well,
right?
I tell you what, you know, my almost 90 years, we've never had the combination of conflicts. And the main one here last year or so was the virus. And that has been a major social and economic setback to progressive social change. And suddenly the Republicans feel as though they can't win an election. And so they have to find a way to steal it or suppress the vote. And I don't think that's true. I think we do have a big change in the electorate, but it's not because there are more Black people and brown people. It's because more young white people are getting a chance to get a college education, and through community colleges where they don't have to pay as much. And they are voting Democrat. When everybody just expects, well, when the Republicans expected the overwhelming majority of white people to vote Republican. But white women don't like a lot of this abortion foolishness. They also don't believe in, well, let's say they do believe in the truth, and they believe the truth will set you free. And so when we have people who want to twist the truth to whatever they think will help them, that makes the two-party system hard to function. And right now, I don't know what the Senate is doing. I don't know what the Republican minority is doing. They have enough to stop things from happening, but they don't have anything that they want to make happen.
So it seems like fruitless fighting with no goal, especially not the goal of helping the nation and the people.
Well, it seems as though the Republican goal is just to stay in office. And that may be unfair, but That's certainly the way it seems. And everybody in the Republican Party knew that there was an attempt on January 6th to take over the electorate in the Congress and switch the election. That was a plan of about 1,000 people. And you don't know how deep it is and how close it came to coming. That's what we're just now finding out. But it means we've got to be more diligent, more careful, more what's the word I want? More upstanding, put it that way. That's an easy word.
Right. Well,
And that it's the issues that we're disagreeing on. We don't really disagree on. I don't think there's anybody, Democratic or Republican, that doesn't believe that children ought to be educated and well educated. But they will fight about giving milk to school children, or they will fight about the size of the classes, or that people would rather put money into. Well, if you look at the way the technical side of society has been growing, it's been very hard, almost impossible for ordinary people to keep up. Just the cost of the devices, it gets you back in trouble.
so if you were going, I guess I have two more. I was kind of curious. You made mention, you said you guys were trying to deal with the problems of integrating the North. How are they different than the problems integrating the South? Were they?
Well, for instance, the whole state of Alabama had 2 million people, but there are 2 million Black people in Chicago alone. And so just the sheer size of the big cities of the North and the complications of their size that are caused by that size means that you're going to have to do some things different.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we've always tried to embrace those people and who don't necessarily like us, and show them that well, in a football game, if Black players and white players don't play together, you lose. But that's also true in a business.
Okay. Do you have any like what would you like if you were going to say a message to the nation, given the amount of division we have, to the people, not the government per se, but just to the people, with the with the tensions we've had, between like the police and everything else, and just that it's come a long way, and I'm very grateful for the work you and Dr. King and my father-in-law did to integrate and build that bridge between different ethnicities. But there's, like you said, there seems to be division everywhere in the last few years, which division is a device of the devil. We're supposed to be one nation under God, united we stand, divided we fall, right? So what would you like to say to the nation? Do you have anything you would say to encourage that unity,
Well,
to beware of?
yeah, I think that we have to realize that humanity and population and weather, everything about human life and destiny is in motion. and that we're never going to have things automatically easy. We're going to always have to struggle to find a common ground where, if and when we are fair, everybody can live a good life according to the Constitution.
Okay. So, were you ever afraid in your civil rights activities?
I guess I was, but not much. I was blessed with a grandmother who didn't fear death. And she used to pray to God to take her home because she lost her sight when she was 80. And she didn't want to be a burden on her children. And she was so comfortable with life after death. And so was Dr. King. He would make jokes about his getting killed and things like that. And these were people who did not fear life or death. And you end up wanting to be like them and realizing that that's the only way to be. That you and Dr. King said, you're gonna die. Everybody's got to die. And you don't have anything to say about when you die, where you die, or how you die. The only thing you have to choice about is, what is it you give your life for? And it was almost as though, and with me, like that was 58, 59 years ago when he was killed in 1968. And I don't think he's gone anywhere. I mean, I don't see him personally, but his voice, his speeches, his prophetic utterances are just as relevant today as they were 58 years ago. And it's almost like, I would say right now, more people know about Martin Luther King than did in his lifetime. And that's one of the reasons why I believe in a resurrection faith. I believe that this is my Father's world, and he works with us to make it work better, like his kingdom.
Amen. By the way, it's Pastor Appreciation Month. Happy Pastor Appreciation Month. It's Pastor Appreciation Month, so happy Pastor Appreciation.
Oh, thank you.
Well, so everyone's going to die. So it matters what you live for. So, and you
Pretty much.
And so what would you say you have given your life for?
I don't know. I've not been conscious of giving my life for anything. I've been conscious of the fact that the earth is the Lord's, it's not mine, and that I have to work to make this earth more like God's kingdom. And along the way, I'll meet a lot of good people like your in-laws that work at that and enjoy doing it, preach it, and teach it. And we do the best that we can, knowing that none of us is perfect. So our society will never be fully perfect, but it'll always, we can always find a way to make it a little bit better.
Amen. What you said about Dr. Martin Luther King's words still being relevant, just as relevant today, I think that's because what he spoke is truth, and truth stands the test of time. So I recently went to a prayer gathering at the National Monument to the Forefathers in Plymouth. And in attendance were Native Americans that were descendants of those that were there when the
Very good.
Pilgrims settled, along with descendants of the Mayflower. And they reenacted a pilgrim service, and one of the sermons, I believe it was Governor Bradford, and it was as if the sermon was written for everything we're facing right now. And it was written when the Pilgrims first settled. And that is just the beauty of truth, is that it's just relevant, and it stands, it's still
Do you
ring.
have a copy of that sermon?
I can get, yes, I can. I will get you
I'd like
that.
to
And-
see it.
yeah, and I have videos of we had Native American ministers speak at this event, as well as others, and it was an amazing, truly an amazing time to see. So I think you would be blessed by it and be blessed by that sermon. It's in a book, but I will find everything for you. I need to gather it anyway. So anyway, I so appreciate your time. How is the fundraising going for your documentary? Do you have an expected release date?
Actually, we have finished it,
Ah,
and we show it on a syndicated network, which
okay,
is different in every city.
okay,
Now, I don't know that we have any in Canada,
okay. So for all
Uh,
the Saints is
but I'm
finished?
sure it might show on some station in Tennessee. Well, I know it will in Memphis, Nashville,
Okay, and it's the For the Saints documentary,
or all the saints.
For all the Saints, it's out, okay?
It's I tell you what, you can also look it up on your computer under Andrew Young Presents.
Okay,
And we have almost 40 films that we've made through the years.
yes, I did peek in on some of them. I would love to block out some time and immerse myself and watch all of them all at once. Okay, because on your Andrew
There's
Young,
another one you might find if you're interested in the foreign policy work I did, which was also influenced greatly by the seminary, the UN, and it's under YouTube, and it's the diplomatic style of Andrew Young on BBC.
okay. I'm writing that down.
Okay.
Okay, any parting words you'd like to?
Well,
The
just when you talk to your mother-in-law or your grandmother-in-law, whatever she is,
My mother-in-law, she's a doll. Yes.
tell her hello for me, and tell her that just your calling reminded me of so many wonderful memories that we shared 70 years ago.
Well, if you, any particular ones come to mind?
No, I think just the mention of their name
Yep,
warmed my heart.
yep,
They were such a loving, sweet, and dedicated couple to each other,
yep.
and to the kingdom of God.
Okay,
Um, they were good role models for me. And my wife, she died of cancer after 40 years of marriage. But we had the kind of marriage that, that she had, where we no fussing and arguing, and we were both dedicated pretty much to the same thing and did the best we could.
okay.
And thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. You've been a blessing. I do want to say something. You brought up your wife, Jean,
Mhm.
and I spoke with Janet Bartley from the Oak Ridge, Tennessee Church from Chapel on a Hill last week, I believe it was. And I asked about her memories of when you visited. And she said that, she said, you were such a good speaker. I should send you the clip of what she said. And she said that your wife spoke of you so much and so kindly. So just know that from your family
Yeah.
out, the way you treated people and how you've invested in others really impacted people. And just like you brought up your relationship, and she could see that, you know, that you were
Good.
greatly admired and greatly loved and respected.
Well, I feel that way.
Yeah,
And I try to love everybody.
I see that.
Okay, God bless you.
God bless you.
Okay,
Ambassador, you have a wonderful day.
will.
Be in touch. All right. Well, this is Rachel M. Colby with Tattoo It in Your Heart. Thank you for joining us, Ambassador Young. I appreciate. God bless you. And you can check out what Andrew Young is up to. Ambassador Young is up to andrewyoung.org. And thank you for joining us and reminding you to tattoo it on your heart and walk it out in your skin. And you can stop by and tattooitonyourheart.com.
Thank you very much.
All right. God bless
Love you and God bless you.
Love you too. Bye-bye.